Concerning schizophrenia, I have covered how the condition is broken down into positive and negative symptoms, and how pharmacological treatments remain the mainstay for acute and long-term care, even though they only significantly impact positive symptoms and only at the potential high cost of causing debilitating and even permanent side effects. In sum, combined with other poor outcomes, the drugs, one way or another, leave the individual diagnosed with schizophrenia in a terrible state. Yet the U.S. mental health industry believes these treatments to be so effective that it pushes the idea that it is unethical to study outcomes for schizophrenia without their use. Paired with this, I have also covered how little the condition is understood, with many potential causes suspect, but with research always remaining inconclusive. In addition, culture has also been implicated in the course of schizophrenia. Studies from the World Health Organization, for example, led some prominent experts to suggest that the course of schizophrenia is more favorable in developing societies than in developed societies. Although the methodologies for these studies has been criticized and these conclusions have been rejected, calls for more thorough research into the matter of culture seem to be consistently ignored. What we get instead from the professional literature is an exploration of the past, or rather, more supposed experts who take the label for a condition we apparently know very little about, and so clearly do not know how to properly treat, and apply that label to historical figures from hundreds of years ago, all based on inadequate or incomplete information. Very basically, the obvious reality is, if we cared as a culture about those individuals who experience delusions, hallucinations, apathy, cognitive deficits, and so on, we would need to take a completely different approach to the problem. And this is where I want to bring in journalist and author Robert Whitaker. In his book Anatomy of an Epidemic, Whitaker uncovers a unique case study of schizophrenia through a series of interviews. As Whitaker writes, for a long time, Western Lapland in Finland had one of the highest rates of schizophrenia in Europe. There are about 70,000 people who live there, and during the 1970s and early 1980s, 25 or so new cases of schizophrenia appeared each year, an incident rate double and even triple the norm for other parts of Finland and the rest of Europe. Furthermore, those patients regularly became chronically ill. But today, the long-term outcomes of psychotic patients in Western Lapland are the best in the Western world, and this region now sees very few new cases of schizophrenia. This is a medical success that has been decades in the making, and it began in 1969 when Oloinen, a Finnish psychiatrist who had psychoanalytic training, arrived at the psychiatric hospital in Turku, a port city in western Finland. At the time, few psychiatrists in the country thought that psychotherapy could help schizophrenics. However, Oloinen believed that the hallucinations and paranoid utterances of schizophrenic patients, when carefully parsed, told meaningful stories. Hospital psychiatrists, nurses, and staff needed to listen to the patients. It's almost impossible for anyone meeting with these patients' families to not understand that they have difficulties in life. Oloinen explained in an interview at the psychiatric hospital in Turku. They are not ready to be adults, and we can help with this development. Over the next 15 years, Oloinen and a handful of other Turku psychiatrists, most notably Aaltonen and Raukkolainen, created what they call the need-adapted treatment of psychotic patients. Since psychotic patients are a very heterogeneous group, they decided that treatment needed to be case-specific. Some first-episode patients would need to be hospitalized, and others would not. Some would benefit from low doses of psychiatric medications, either benzos or neuroleptics, and others would not. Most important, the Turku psychiatrists settled on group family therapy of a particularly collaborative type as the core treatment. Psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, and others trained in family therapy all served on 2- and 3-member psychosis teams, which would meet regularly with the patient and his or her family. Decisions about the patient's treatment were made jointly at those meetings. In those sessions, the therapists did not worry about getting the patient's psychotic symptoms to abate. Instead, they focused on the conversation, on the patient's past successes and achievements, with the thought that this would help strengthen his or her grip on life. The hope, said Rakulinen, is that they haven't lost the idea that they can be like others. The patient might also receive individual psychotherapy to help this process along, and eventually the patient will be encouraged to construct a new self-narrative for going forward. The patient imagining a future where he or she was integrated into society rather than isolated from it. This approach proved to be a success. A study of first episode schizophrenic-type patients treated from 1983 to 1984 found that 61% were asymptomatic at the end of 5 years, and only 18% were on disability. However, the question of the best use of antipsychotics remained, and in 1992, Finland mounted a study of first episode patients to answer it. All 6 sites in the study provided the newly diagnosed patients with need-adapted treatment. But in 3 of the centers, the patients were not put on antipsychotics during the first 3 weeks. Benzos could be used, with drug therapy initiated only if the patient hadn't improved during this period. At the end of 2 years, 43% of the patients from the 3 experimental sites had never been exposed to neuroleptics, and overall outcomes of the experimental sites were somewhat better than they were at the centers where nearly all of the patients had been exposed to the drugs. Furthermore, among the patients at the 3 experimental sites, those who had never been exposed to neuroleptics had the best outcomes. I would advise case-specific use of the drugs, Rakulinen said. Try without antipsychotics. You can treat them better without medication. They become more interactive. They become themselves. Add an Altonin. If you can postpone medication, that's important. It might seem that Finnish psychiatry, given the outcomes of the study, would have then embraced on a national level this no immediate use of neuroleptics model of care. Instead, Alanin and the other creators of need-adapted treatment retired, and during the 1990s, Finland's treatment of psychosis became much more biologically oriented. Thankfully, to summarize a bit of this information, one of the experimental sites in the 1992 through 1993 study, Tornio, appreciated the results enough to develop open dialogue therapy based on Turku's need-adapted model and immediately started a new study charting the long-term outcomes of all first-episode psychotic patients in Western Lapland from 1992 through 1997. This was in large part due to the work of Jaakko Sikula. At the end of the 5 years, 79% of the patients were asymptomatic and 80% were working, in school, or looking for work. Only 20% were on government disability. 2/3 of the patients had never been exposed to antipsychotic medication, and only 20% took the drugs regularly. Western Lapland had discovered a successful formula for helping psychotic patients recover, with its policy of no immediate use of neuroleptics in first-episode patients critical to that success, as it provided an escape valve for those who could recover naturally. Over the past 17 years, open dialogue therapy has transformed the picture of the psychotic population in Western Lapland. Since the 1992-93 study, not a single first-episode psychotic patient has ended up chronically hospitalized. Spending on psychiatric services in the region dropped 33% from the 1980s to the 1990s. And today, the district's per capita spending on mental health services is the lowest among all districts in Finland. Recovery rates have stayed high. From 2002 to 2006, Tornio participated in a multinational study by Nordic countries of first-episode psychosis, and at the end of 2 years, 84% of the patients had returned to work or school, and only 20% were taking antipsychotics. Most remarkable of all, schizophrenia is now disappearing from the region. Only 2 or 3 new cases of schizophrenia appear each year in Western Lapland, a 90% drop since the early 1980s. Tornio's success has drawn the attention of mental health care providers in other European countries, and during the past 20 years, 2 or 3 other groups in Europe have reported that the combination of psychosocial care and limited use of neuroleptics has produced good outcomes. This really happened, Sikula said. It's not just a theory. In the US, as a reminder, treating 1/2 of the problem of schizophrenia with medication that does and can, in reality, cause serious and permanent side effects is considered so effective that study of outcomes for schizophrenia without their use is believed to be unethical. Never mind that this matter of ethics is discussed and determined most consistently by those professionals with conflict of interest ties to the pharmaceutical industry. The fact that we allow these professionals and the mental health industry more broadly to make these decisions for the whole of society demonstrates how little we value the individual as a society and culture. It highlights how unwilling we are to call back to my last series of videos to give the individual our loyalty as family, loved ones, neighbors, or as fellow members of our communities. And the fact that in turn, when homelessness, violence, and other problems abound, we would call for a return of the state mental and behavioral hospitals so we have a place to make the homeless or violent disappear, or calls for more funding for mental health care so those facing issues like schizophrenia can continue to be tortured by the mental health industry professional. These reinforce this view. Maybe if we want less violence, homelessness, and other issues, we can start by treating people as if they have inherent value. And it is inconceivable that this can be done by any governmental system or by any bureaucratic body. This must be done on a person-to-person basis. And naturally, this leaves major implications for our current climate, with large swaths of people continuing to invest all their time and energy in the political class, rather than in each other. And that is all I have for now. I hope to see you next time.